Instead of depending on me or anyone else to get the HDR settings right on your games, I want to empower you. I want to show you how you can set up the HDR and get it right all the time. So at the end of this video, I promise you, you will know how to set up the HDR on every single game, okay? There are some games that have HDR broken, there's nothing we can do about, and I'm gonna give you a solution for that too. So we are going to use this app, HGIG Image Viewer, and this is going to work for PS5, Xbox, PC. The only thing you need to do on those consoles is take a screenshot, and then you're going to open those screenshots on your computer, your PC, using this app. It's called HDR.WCG Image Viewer. So what this app is gonna tell you is what is the game trying to do. So if the game is trying to output 10,000 nits, you know you have a problem. And then dynamic tone mapping might save the day or not. So I'm gonna show you the settings on the TV first. So on the TV, ideally, the settings we want to use all the time on HDR are HGIG, and we want to use the colors auto detect 55, warm 50. So that should be the HDR settings for every single game. So here's the problem. We know that this LG C1, for example, has 800 nits as the maximum peak brightness. If you have a G1, that might be 900 to 1000 nits. So it depends on your display. So the problem is some games don't tell you what that slider is trying to do if the game has slider, or there are some games that depend on system level calibration. So for example, Death Stranding, it has a slider that's 55, it goes from 50 to 100%, so it's just a percentage slider, so you don't know what's the value. Hellblade, same thing, it has a slider 50 to 100 and you don't know what that is trying to do. So with this method, what you're gonna do is take a screenshot, and then you're going to see here what is the game trying to do. So for example, in Death Stranding, on the calibration screen, I set this to 55 just by eye. I see that the clouds on 55, they don't clip, they look the best. But on that calibration screen, when I take the screenshot, the maximum the game is trying to do is 584 nits. So I realized that's not a big highlight to make that comparison. So then I enter the game, I take a screenshot, and I see the maximum is 797. So then the setting on 55 is perfect. That's how you do it. As easy as that. You just find on the game the sun. It's just an easy answer. Just find the sun, look at the clouds, take a screenshot. You come here and you see how much the game is trying to do. If the game is trying to do 900, just lower the value, that brightness value, until you get 800 or 780, 797 is the value I see all the time on every single game. So for example, Hellblade. Let me show you Hellblade. On Hellblade, it's the same. We have a slider. We have a slider that's 50 to 100%. We don't know what that slider is doing. So we set DCI-P3, because DCI-P3 is the color space that this TV can cover the best. BT2020 is not covered completely. So DCI-P3 looks more colorful on Hellblade. So on Hellblade, when you set the slider to 70, you get 797. So the game is trying to output 797. So you know for sure that 70 is the correct value. And of course, the game trying to output 800 nits is okay for this TV, and there's no clipping on the highlights. So for example, on the second picture I took was with the value on 30. So that slider on 30, the game is trying to output 447 nits, okay? So you're not taking advantage of the full brightness of your display. So the comparison here, I see that there's no clipping, of course, because the game is trying to output 797. So that's how you do it, as simple as that. If the game has a maximum brightness slider that you can see is 6, 7, or 800 nits, that's what you do. You set that slider to 800, and some games have the option to adjust the mid-tones or the paper white, and for that you want 200 or 180, maximum 210. So what I like is 180 for the mid-tones and 800 for the peak brightness. So that's it. The other thing you have to check on every single game is the black level. So you just have to watch a dark background on the game. So for example, a loading screen that you can see that is supposed to be black, and you have to adjust the black level. On the previous video, I showed this idea of taking a screenshot, so you can then very easily adjust the black level, but that doesn't work, and I tested that extensively. It doesn't work because the black level on this picture is slightly different than on the real game. So yeah, it doesn't work. The idea was good, but it doesn't work. But the idea of using this app is actually very good. So what you have to do is go here to this screen brightness, and on the games you have to make sure that the black level is perfect, like you're getting perfect OLED black, so you get that infinite contrast. So on a loading screen, you're going to raise this number until you see that you no longer have perfect black, and then you lower it one click. So it should be 50, but there are some games that have the black level raised, like Genshin Impact. I needed to lower this to 38, which is insane. But it was easy to set up because on Genshin Impact, for example, we have a brightness calibration screen, which it has black. So it allows you to very easily check the black level. That's it. There's no magic on this. You don't have to be a wizard, an expert to set up HDR on the games. This works all the time. So what about dynamic tone mapping? Some people think that, oh, HGIG is too dark, I cannot use it. I'm gonna tell you the truth. To get this, and you see how long this image has been on the screen, and it's not dimming, okay? The problem with HGIG is that these LG OLED TVs are coming with a protection mechanism to dim the screen when it detects when the screen is detecting a bright object too long on the screen, and that is going to destroy the HDR. I'm sorry. So I don't want to recommend everyone to go on the service menu, because that can potentially void your warranty. It is not going to, really. Based on my research, if you have any problem with the warranty, you can just change the values on the service menu back to the default values, and the engineers are not going to care, okay? Basically, there is a log that records everything you do on the service menu, so that information is there, but the engineers they don't care. They don't care. So what you do, just change TPC and GSR on the service menu. You turn that off to prevent dimming, because if you're trying to get a perfect HDR range, but the TV is dimming the screen, you cannot get it. And that's why people say, oh, HGIG is too dark. Bro, you have dimming on your TV. That's why it's too dark. For example, this shot here, you see it is very, very, very subtle shadow detail here, because this object on the background is super bright. So if I have dimming, there's no way I can see what's going on here, because this is so bright and it's static. The TV is going to dim and I cannot see her anymore. That's what happened. So unfortunately, LG is not allowing you to have that by default. because they are afraid of burning. I don't care. If I cannot use the TV out of the box, the way the TV comes with those dimming mechanisms, the HDR with HGIG is unusable. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. There might be some games that are very dynamic, so the screen is not gonna dim that much, but most games, they have a HUD, so when the TV starts to see static elements on the screen, it freaks out, and it kicks, all those mechanisms, they kick in. So you lose that HDR. You have to use dynamic tone mapping, and that's not the best option. So that's the reality. To get the HDR, you have to turn off those TPC and GSR so the screen doesn't dim, so you can get that shadow detail that doesn't change, that it doesn't get even dimmer. And also when you are on the darkness, when it's a very prolonged dark scene, also the TV thinks, if it has those two mechanisms on, the TV thinks that it's a static, there's no dynamic content, and it starts to dim the screen even more, so you cannot see anything. So it is what it is. So how about dynamic tone mapping? There is a use for dynamic tone mapping, okay? So if you test a game like this, for example, test a game like let me see, Shadow of War, for example. Let me show you Shadow of War. So Shadow of War is trying to output 10,000 nits, okay? So that's just straight up broken. I'm sorry. Some people think, or some people have the opinion that, okay, so, these TVs are not able to do 10,000 nits. So because of that, the problem is not the game, the problem is the TV. No, I'm sorry. These developers, they know that nobody has a 10,000 nits display to play video games. So if you master your HDR on 10,000 nits and that's all you have, that's not an option. I'm sorry. That's just broken, in my opinion. Because the idea of waiting until you have a 10,000 nits display to play a game that is 5 years old, that's just ridiculous. So all these games that are coming with a 5,000, 10,000 nits mastering, and they don't give you the option to lower that, for me, that's broken. But dynamic tone mapping is supposed to save the day, and it does sometimes. So for example, here on Shadow of War, if I open the calibration screen, okay, on the calibration screen, you can use dynamic tone mapping, and you will realize that this actually gets a fix. So when you use dynamic tone mapping, so remember, the game is trying to output 10,000 nits. Not here in the calibration screen, it says 525, but the game is actually trying to do 10,000. So when you turn on dynamic tone mapping here, you will see that on the calibration screen you can now see both objects, and they are perfectly visible. So the game looks perfect, no problem. You turn on dynamic tone mapping, you can play the game. I don't see any clipping. The shadow detail is perfectly visible. So you are not going to get a spectacular HDR experience in terms of the luminance, because the highlights are not going to be 800 nits. The highlights are gonna be like 600 nits, okay? Because of that dynamic tone mapping, it's not going to be spectacular, but it is better than SDR, because you're going to get that wider color gamut, which is more colorful. So a wider color gamut, it is supposed to be more colorful, 100%. That's the question I had, and after studying, I know that for a fact. That's the whole point of a wider color gamut, to be more colorful. So you get that wider color gamut, which looks beautiful. It's not gonna be perfect HDR, because you're not gonna get those 800 nits highlights because of dynamic tone mapping, but it is what you have, and it works very well. There are some games that this doesn't work very well. For example, Horizon Zero Dawn is also trying to output 10,000 nits, and it doesn't work very well. But if you leave the sliders on the default position and you turn on dynamic tone mapping, it does work. You are going to see a lot of clipping. So on the highlights, they are going to clip a lot, but it is usable. In that case, I much rather use the HLG trick. The problem with the HLG trick on Horizon Zero Dawn is that that game, just by default, pushes the red a lot, especially on the sunrise. So HLG pushes the red even more so. It looks wild. It looks a little bit wild. But it is the best looking option in my opinion. So what I mean with, by using HLG on these broken HDR games is you just go to the settings. I've showed this many times just in case this is the first video you see. You go to settings here, 111, 3111. So you step on select mode and you change this EOTF from auto to HLG. You have to be on SDR to do that, not on HDR. So the game has to be on SDR. So by doing that, it's going to look awesome luminance wise, HDR effect wise. It's going to look fantastic. And for the tone mapping, the best option is tone mapping off. You turn off tone mapping with that HLG trick and it looks fantastic. So that is it. That's it. There's no secret. You don't have to be an expert. You don't need to understand these fancy words like electro transfer function and clipping the highlights and specular highlight detail, all those fancy words. You don't need to understand or know none of that. Just use this app, take a screenshot. You have to check for sure that max brightness that the game is trying to push is 800 nits, and there you go. So for example, also let me prove to you that this is actually, for example, let's take a look at this GTA 5 with auto HDR from Windows 11 after calibrating the Windows 11 HDR. I'm gonna post a link on the description of a video where I show you how to set the auto HDR from Windows 11 right. So you get this max CLL 797, okay? Because by default it's gonna try to push over 1000 nits. So every time you check that, you're getting 800. That's perfect. So let me show you. I want to show you before I end this video that this is actually, so this app, I'm gonna show you that this app is actually reporting correctly. For example, here on Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, one of my favorite games ever, by the way. So the maximum brightness, when you set this to 800, look at this. This app is reporting 797. So let me show you a different, by the way, the reason why it looks like that is because I have dynamic tone mapping. Yeah, so you don't want that. Boom, this is what you want. You want the bright object to pop. When you use dynamic tone mapping after setting up the HDR, it's going to over brighten the picture and it's going to take brightness from the highlight. That's what's gonna happen. So you get less HDR effect. So it might look brighter to you overall. We are going to lose HDR effect. So let me show you here on Sekiro. Let me show you a different value. For example, if I turn, this one. No, not this one. Let me see here, 800. Let me see if I set up a different. Well, they are all 800. I think I deleted them. So basically, what I wanted to show you is that, yeah, I was testing, adjusting brightness. It is changing that from 800 to 720. What I wanted to show you is that by changing this maximum brightness from 800 to 700, this reports 700. If you change it to 600, this is going to report 600, okay? Or very close to it. It's like 590 something. So this app is working perfectly. It is reporting that max luminance call perfectly. So there you go, man. I'm still going to do videos, when a new game comes out, share with you the HDR settings, and so you can, do this yourself and you can check that you are going to get the same result that I get. because I'm just telling you everything I know. I'm just telling you how to set up the HDR. So you set up the HDR, you can watch my video, you're gonna see, okay, I know how to do it now. And that's what I want. I don't want you to have to depend on me. So every single game you have to watch my video to get your HDR right. No. If all you care about is to get your HDR games right, this is the last video you have to watch. It's just the way it is. So I never say, oh, share, subscribe. And what I want is to empower you. I want to give you all the information. If I am a good teacher, I'm a great teacher, and I am able to teach you everything, you don't have to come and see me again. I just show you how to do it. Do you have to watch another video of me telling you how to set up HDR? I don't think so. It's simple. Just if the game has sliders, 800, 180, or 200, depend on your preference. If the game doesn't have sliders that tell you exactly what it is, then you just test what those sliders are doing. How much are they trying to push? So you just take a screenshot, you see that, and you're going to set that slider until you get 800 nits on the highlights. And by the way, this is very consistent. So you can take any screenshot of any highlight and it's going to say 797. That's it. If the game is trying to push more, then you cannot use HGIG or tone mapping off. You have to use dynamic tone mapping, and at that point, it's up to